is up, theology nerds? This is Trip, and you're listening to Homebrewed Christianity, where since the year of 2008, we've been bringing you ideological ingredients so you can brew up some zesty faith. That's right, bringing wisdom from the ivory towers and putting it right in your earbuds. And today on the podcast, I'm joined by my friend Dustin. That's right, Dustin Kensrue is on the podcast. He is a singer, songwriter, guitar player for the band Thrice, member of the #Process Party. And they have a brand new album, Horizons East. It is out. It is awesome. They're on tour. And we talk about the album. We talk about some process-related fun things, faith and such, and politics. And really, this album represents kind of a mature voice as an artist, as someone who has transitioned both politically, philosophically, theologically, and we're just friends. So it was tons of fun. But before we hop into this episode, I want to tell you something exciting. That's right. The next class for Homebrewed Christianity, an online exploration of the one and only Søren Kierkegaard. That's right, your favorite 19th century Danish philosopher and theologian, father of existentialism, Søren Kierkegaard. We are going to be spending 6 weeks reading said philosopher, and we are going to be doing it with the one and only Aaron Simmons. That's right, president of the Society for Kierkegaard, and a friend of mine, philosopher of religion, student of Jack Caputo. You've heard him on the podcast. Well, if you would like to read Søren Kierkegaard with us, then go to iHeartKierkegaard.com. iHeartKierkegaard, that is KIERKEGAARD.com. Or you can go to tripfuller.com, find the links and such. But Aaron and I are pretty excited about it, and it's going to be tons of fun. Why? Because this is a time we actually need to be reading Kierkegaard. And guess what? Aaron and I were texting. Came up with 5 reasons today would be a good day to sign up at iHeartKierkegaard.com to read some Kierkegaard. Number 1. Kierkegaard reminds us that faith is about lived commitment, not simply about right belief. Yeah. Number 2, Kierkegaard helps us see that Christian nationalism is antichrist. Well, that's timely. Number 3, Kierkegaard shows what it means to seek faithfulness rather than success. Number 4, Kierkegaard stresses the radical inclusivity of Christ's call. Come, all who are heavy burdened. And number 5, Kierkegaard models what it looks like to see humility as the condition of confidence. Right there, friends, you have 5 good reasons to sign up at iHeartKierkegaard.com and join us for 6 weeks reading and exploring the works of Søren Kierkegaard, philosophically, theologically, ethically, and how they help us think through and process our lives together today. Before we hop into this episode, I want to give major shout outs to this week's podcast sponsor. It's the brand new book from Dr. Amy-Jill Levine, professor of New Testament and Jewish Studies at Vanderbilt Divinity School. That's right, it's her new book, The Difficult Words of Jesus. You know, those difficult words that Jesus has in the Gospels. Maybe sell all you have and give it to the poor, or some fiery comments about hell. Hate your mother and your father. You Jews are the devil. When you read those verses, do you sometimes want to go, Jesus, what were you thinking? What did you mean? Well, if you, like me, have thought that, then Dr. Levine has written a book for you. Find answers and meaning to those perplexing teachings with Amy-Jill Levine and her new study, The Difficult Words of Jesus, a beginner's guide to his most perplexing teachings. The study includes a book, leader guide, video sessions, and with this study, come learn, come to be challenged, come to be inspired, come to be provoked, come to be comforted, and come to even find more of the good news. The Difficult Words of Jesus book and Bible study components are available wherever you buy books. explore the study at abingdonpress.com/difficult words. abingdonpress.com/difficult words, and there are links on the podcast page for this episode. Hello, everyone. This is Trip. You're listening to Homebrewed Christianity, and today, for his third time on the podcast, but fourth recording, I think that's right.
Like we did like a hang once.
Yeah, and
I don't know if that counts.
Well, I mean, it was on the podcast.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the edited version. The first half of the podcast before my inebriation level, like the happy hour, because I'm in Scotland. If this is your first time listening to Dustin and I talk, since moving, like I'm 5 hours ahead of East Coast, but of Dustin, I'm 8 hours ahead. So he's like having coffee, and I'm on my fourth beer right now.
It's my seltzer. It's a seltzer.
Hard seltzer.
No, just soft seltzer.
Yeah, soft. You're doing two. It's 2 p.m. for you.
Yeah.
And now, do you do you have to like you know how like runners carbo load before like big runs? Do you like hydrate load before a beginning of a tour? Because you're about to go on tour with the band Thrice. For anyone that doesn't know, they have a new album.
I hydrate before I play a show, but I started doing it too much one time because I thought more water would be better, right?
Yeah.
And I started feeling real weird, and I realized I like looked it up. Like, can I drink too much water? And yes, you can. And I didn't drink enough to like, I don't think long term hurt me, but it was it was making like the symptoms I was feeling were like precursors of like bad things. Like it was not good.
Well, how much water is that? Like, what kind of water do you have to start having? Like, I drank too much. This isn't like you're getting older and you had to pee twice at night. You're talking like you felt bad.
And I would go in the back of the bus with like 5 water bottles and just drink them, but in a short period of time. And so I would start to feel really gross. It was not cool. Yeah.
Oh, well, I hope you don't do that again.
Yeah.
But anyway, Dustin's been on the podcast before, but he is singer and the songwriter guitarist of the band Thrice. And you know, I tweeted earlier that we were going to talk again, and we have the members of the Process Party have sent rather. If you looked at your Twitter recently,
I saw some of them pop up. I'm a little bit worried to think about these things on the fly, but we'll see.
Okay, but here's the thing. Now, you're going to say something about your new album in just a second, but I just want everyone to know that Horizons East, Thrice's new album, ends with a song called Unitive East. And if you, I don't know, are a member of the Process Party, it will be your new favorite closing song of an album. And I got, well, I'm not going to say what I was about to say. I'm self-editing, but I don't want to ruin anything for anyone. But
what? Oh, what are you going to ruin?
Well, like, not only is it like
you can this talk about it.
Oh, okay, but it's a hint, and then it picks up on one of the themes towards the end of Process and Reality, where it keeps thinking about what is a world in complete relationality that grows together moment to moment, and you've always had this philosophical problem of the many and the one, and many and the one are increased by one, and then you take that theme and then not only observe it as part of the flux of the universe, but then you state that very flux is where the inbreaking of new creation happens, and you do it in like 10 lines. And I was just like,
it's a very short song.
I know, but I was just like,
Thank you. Yeah, it's 8 lines actually.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't count it. I was just basing off my head. I want everyone to go check it out. Anyway, you wrote this album, the new album. You go into it in lockdown. So last time you were on the podcast, which we're recording this, the year anniversary of our happy hour. Did you know that?
No, really?
The Time Hop app sent me this picture of a selfie I took that I didn't put on the internet because I realized I looked very inebriated with you and Dan Koch we're having a happy hour, and I kept this picture like this, and I just didn't post it. And then when I looked at it, I was like, there's a reason, because you two on the West Coast are like, I'm having my first beer of the afternoon. And I'm like, and so I was like, wow, we're talking like a year later. So,
happy anniversary.
it was really sweet. It was really sweet. But maybe as a songwriter who has constantly brought in their kind of like personal questions and in the way their own kind of like commitment to beauty and goodness and stuff, it's been played out in your songs. But how did coming to a new album in lockdown with everything that's going on in the world, and then the way that shifts your flow, like you aren't touring as much, homeschooling, all that kind of stuff, like how did the whole 2020 experience change the songwriting process, production? Like what should we think was different in the production, in the producing this piece of art?
Yeah, I mean, a big one is that we recorded this one ourselves, which we've done before. But now we have, like, for the first time, a fairly legit studio. Like, we had built out in a garage before, and it was very, very tiny and rough. But now we're in like a small industrial space, built a room out. We've been practicing in there, but we got the studio ready in the final like days before we started recording this, to meet the deadlines we needed to meet. But yeah, so us working on our own is always, it's just a different vibe to it, that we kind of settle in, we trust each other, we're doing the work, but there isn't a feeling of like, I don't know, like even with someone you really like and trust, like coming in from the outside, it changes it. So I don't know, we just kind of settle in and go to work, and you're having all those fun moments where you're like, oh, what is the tone on this part actually going to sound like? And how are we going to capture this weird idea that you had? And I don't know, I really like doing our own. And the mix of this is very much like something that we would do ourselves. So worked with this new mixer, and he's a friend. It was great. So that's on the recording side. On the, I don't know, just life side, it's hard to imagine where you'd be without a weird lockdown. Like, I think for like my family and stuff, it was actually really healthy to have a slowdown, especially being, in a touring band. Everything's kind of always like go, 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 go. So yeah, having that forced break was really good for us. But.
Mm-hmm. And I'm asking this because I homeschooled children during lockdown.
Yeah.
How did you write anything? Like, I read a lot, like little reviews, but anything that involves like where you think, if I suck at this, people and my peers will see this, and I don't know if I'm in a good spot. Like, I think I had like 20 pages of awesome in a year, which is significantly lower than normal. And sitting there going, like, I get the production. Like, if I was told I would produce something or whatever, or just talk to somebody about it or whatever, that's different than like go write original material. Like, how did the whole shift of rhythm and things change the songwriting process?
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is the last two records kind of prepped us for this one, because the last two, somebody was living out of town, and so we had to get better at sharing ideas over online, and then getting together and do like more intensive, like small like jam sessions where we're actually playing these ideas and figuring out how they feel to actually play all together. And so it kind of ended up being the same way, because we were locked down. So we were sharing a bunch of ideas, and then some of us have like immunocompromised family members, so we're trying to be extra careful. So we're in the studio before, any vaccines or anything. We're in there, we're masked, trying to do this, play songs, and then go back out to our homes, mess with this stuff again. So it was a pretty similar process in that sense, which was kind of funny. But I think, I don't know. As far as like writing lyrics, I do think that I am progressing in how I am opening up to to not overthinking everything all the time, especially in the actual process of trying to get words on the page. That's been a struggle for me historically because I overthink and I am very critical and therefore a good editor, but not a good prolific writer. And so I've been better at like letting things out and realizing like I can let it out and I can always edit it, but let it out. And so either, sometimes just a nonsense thing I'm singing to get a melody. Some of those ended up on the record, actually a fair amount of those. And those little pictures that would come out would influence what I would write on the rest of that song. And that would influence the rest of the record. So just being open to like those things happening in the moment. And then, or like there's a chorus that's like a final chorus that I wrote in like actually a couple choruses where I wrote really quickly because I wanted to sing harmonies too. So it's like I need some words here so I can sing harmony and show the guys. And so I'd do it and it would be like, I want to like this, but I don't want to overthink it. And I would write it. I can change it later. And then ended up being like, I really liked that. That was cool. I let it out and it was good. So
yeah. So one of the questions that when I was tweeting about you coming on the podcast and us hanging out was, has your understanding of the world and the divine and stuff changed the way you think about the songwriting process, or kind of like when you've achieved truth or authenticity or succeeded at communicating something? Like, how does your understanding of beauty, truth, and goodness change succeeding or like respecting what when you're attempting to capture it?
I mean, I think honestly, I think what I was just saying probably ties into that a lot. I think part of that letting go is a piece of like a larger letting go into a lot of uncertainty, but that certainty being kind of fertile ground for beauty and goodness to rise out of. So I think that would be the most direct way, is that I'm less uptight about a lot of things as a result of shifting worldviews, and that influences the way I write, I think.
So, okay. So,
and I guess here's another thing in terms of like relationality. I've been thinking a lot about just the way that no piece of art is ever experienced the same way by two people. It's like you can't step in the same river twice, that kind of thing. Like, it's true of like, even like, I'm not going to experience the same song the second time I listen to it rather than the first time, right? Because I have a different context now hearing it again.
What about when you play like, I don't know, the song that you wish you had changed when you wrote it the 1,000th time? Is that like for a songwriter, like that creativity thing, is that or kind of like being in the now, this is a unique experience, is that like a way someone frames like doing the song the millionth time? Or does that make sense? Like how, like
a song that you don't like, or a song that you do like?
No, I mean one that if you don't play, the people that bought the tickets are like, come on, I wanted to sing this with you. There's, like if you don't play if you don't play Mr. Jones and you're Counting Crows, the people are like, I bought a ticket, but when you play it, you're like, how long I've played this song every concert, every night. Like when you were saying that, as a musician, I wonder how that desire for like each instance is different. Then what do you do with it with everyone you're related to? Changes the way you go into playing a song you've played 1,000 times before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the song. I mean, some songs are old enough and just like the feel of them. I'm not going into like a profound place playing them. Maybe I don't know myself, but some of them like my relation to shifts over time, and sometimes it's challenging. Sometimes it's surprising, like in the moment, being like, oh dang, like I see that in a totally different way. And a lot of times it's cooler than the way I saw it before. And so there's certain songs that I even stopped playing for a while and then reoriented myself towards, and found what I found was a more profound framework to look at it and perform
it. Mm-hmm. Has not playing a live show for so long with a gap like changed the way you see the experience of doing a show?
I don't know. It's just the whole thing feels weird right now going out in it, but it's kind of like we're trying to make it as safe as we can, and the world can't just shut down forever. So it's, I don't know. We're doing the best we can, but it definitely feels weird. We're basically going to be bubbled up on tour, no one else in our dressing room. We're masked like all the time, unless we're in our bus or in our dressing room. And like, I don't know, it's going to be weird. It's going to be weird. But thankfully we have, our crew is like family and it's good people to hang with, but those will be the only people.
It will. I was thinking of it because 2 weeks ago was the first time, and we've been a little more hardcore in Scotland until recently about lockdown and stuff, but I'd gone 16 months without the Eucharist and or worshiping in person. And I was preaching the first or second week. Things are completely kind of like more open enough that you go to church here in Scotland. And I preached at the Cathedral of St. Mary's on like the Festival of Mary and the Fringe Festival. Right. So it went from, it was a full cathedral. It was a lot of people. And I was a guest preacher, and then they asked me to serve communion, and seeing people from, all over the countries that are allowed to come in, go to a festival, go to worship, and then receiving communion. And it's something I've done a bunch of times, but I hadn't done it. You then have that communal experience, and it's something that's meaningful to people, and then you're sharing it. And it was like, oh my, like, this is wonderful. And there are like few things like that. Like rock concerts are one of them for me. Like the eschaton should include high quality theology seminars, rock concerts, and like battles of high quality West Coast IPAs. But I wonder that it wasn't until I was in the moment and realized they also wanted me to serve communion that I was like, this is beautiful. And as someone who spent time in all settings playing music, the chance to do it again, and what happens in a community singing together in a show or in a religious context. I mean, it's just a unique thing to like take out of your life and you don't realize.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about that aspect a lot. There's just not been a lot of those things that are these, what is the term, muscular bonding, things that are these ways that we as people move into a different kind of headspace for a moment where we're merging, we're seeing ourselves as part of something larger than ourselves. And shows are definitely a very cool way that happens. So I'm very much looking forward to that aspect of getting back out there.
Now, if you have the album, you can listen to this and then talk about it. But The Color of the Sky. One, why'd you pick it for the first, like, to kick off?
Yeah. That was like a late call, and it was because I was listening to Radiohead, and I guess I was listening to Kid A album, but it was on shuffle or something. And so I was hearing songs out of order, and it made me hear them in a different context. Again, all about, the relationality between things. And I realized that some of the songs on there don't feel so like Kid A, if you know what I mean. Like if you hear them not in the order. And so the first two songs on that record, I realized really, really set the tone for how you hear the rest of the record as you move through it. And it kind of colors it. And so we were going to have Scavengers be first. And we were talking about this, and I shared this, and we were like, oh, wait, we should not do that. We should do whatever is going to set that tone for the rest of the record. And it was pretty clear that that was going to be the color of the sky. So very, very happy we made that switch. Well, especially I think because it actually, that the whole narrative of that song is essentially like a mini story of the theme that the whole record is getting at, moving out of what James Carse calls a system of belief to a system of inquiry, basically out of a closed off system that's not taking in the world, not in the moment. It's has its answers already, right? Moving to a place of openness, and where you take a step and the horizon shifts, and you take another step and the horizon shifts again, and it keeps going. And so that it's basically a little mini story that illustrates that happening.
Yeah. Now, the other question about that song was, you basically already answered it, but the other reason that you could say for putting that song first is that it has the kind of beginning that when you hear it, and once you know the song, like the third or fourth time you hear it, it has the beginning that you turn it up when you hear it. Like some songs, if it's loud, you're like, oh, this is good. I'm glad it's loud. But it has, like, you hear it and you're like, oh, hell yeah. And then you like turn it up. Like, and not all songs have that. And there are plenty of good ones that don't. But it has like, oh yeah, move.
Yeah. And that's not a bad move too, especially because we like to not over compress our records and mastering. So they tend to be a little quieter if you A/B them to something. So yeah, give people a chance to turn it up.
Well, there you go. But the also what is the, like, when you talk about the theme of a record and things, I mean, you and I had talked a little bit before this, but I wonder, as a songwriter, does a theme emerge from you as you're going through the creative process, or do you start out with the theme, write the songs, and then figure out which ones do we put on the album, how do we order it, and that kind of thing?
I've been thinking about it in terms of a metaphor recently, and I'm going to expand it right now, because you asked the first part of the question too, but it's almost like a solar system forming. So like there's all this material floating around, and it starts to coalesce into this larger thing, right? And then that thing ends up becoming a sun or a planet. We'll say sun if we're doing the solar system thing. So that all starts spinning out, heating up, and you're like, oh man, I think there's something going on here, because it's just naturally forming out of all the stuff that is floating around your brain and the ideas that you're working on. And that starts forming. And then there's these like pockets or little things that are floating further away. And now those things start getting pulled closer by the gravity of like the main thing. So, it's not like everything is trying to be written about that thing generally, but now that the gravity of it exists, it pulls all the ideas into orbit, and changes their focuses, I guess. So they all end up being about different things, but they are relating to the larger thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that makes sense. The when I was thinking about this album, after a second or third time I listened to it, in one sense, the exploration of a different way of seeing your story and place in the world, like from one that involves kind of certainty, finality, and closure, to one that is seeing the whole process of becoming as an invitation to something different. Like that, this album in many ways is connected to some of the theme in Palms.
Yeah.
But like it's a clear extinction, like this in Just Breath or Just Breathe, and Everything Belongs. Like both of those songs have this kind of promissory note, right? Like that in the space of discontinuity, disjunction, deconstruction, or all the type of stuff, there's like a promissory note that you're starting to trust in the uncomfortability, where it's like this uncomfortability that is shocked this previous kind of closed encounter with the world. Like in that opening, there's something you can trust. And even like a branch in the river is like, has the confidence in it as it connects to the need for decision and stuff like that. And so this album to me seems like someone who has just exhaled after like connecting dots, putting things together, struggling. And it is like, has the first pint after like a big hike, where is the payoff, right? Like this beer would not take this good if I didn't just like hike all day with my friends and we had to like climb and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, and it's like when you sit down, like, and you have that first sip, all of a sudden you realize you could tell the same story you told on the trail with a different type of confidence, because you're like, no, I did get here and I am sipping this. That's a metaphor or image I came up with for the relationship of this album and the last one.
That's much better than I've been talking about it. I'm going to steal it now. No, that's very observant though. People basically what I've been saying is like, it's been hard to find a way to put it, but yeah, like the last Palms is definitely, a lot of it was in the middle of the struggle, like writing it to emerge into that new place. And this one definitely feels like the emergence and a looking back and a looking forward, and again, like a rooting in the present. But yeah, I like the beer analogy.
Well, and the even in the second track on the new album, the Scavenger song, is that second? Is that, I think it's second.
Yeah, second.
Like there, when you're do you know how like sometimes if you were, the song itself is dealing with the like how a toxic picture, encounter, worldview exists, and it has all these consequences, but the song itself is wanting to label something as problematic. And in the last album, a lot of the songs were, don't you think this might be problematic in tone? And this is like, this is a scavenger. Let's just be honest. This is problematic. And now, you sent me the lyrics and the music, so that I'm like listening to it and reading it, and we're friends. And I feel like it's like if you say something to me about my book and I'm like, oh, my friend took the time to read the book, kind of thing. And so did you consciously recognize that because you've come to own more of the space you're in now, you're able to state with a kind of clarity a lot of people don't have about some of the problems and toxic patterns of relations, like in what you left behind?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I saw that while writing, but as you say it, I definitely can see that there's some truth there. And I think I've been struggling with how to articulate it in interviews without sounding like, it's hard to not sound like, to speak with confidence about something, but not sound like I've arrived, like I've found all the answers. Like, and the best way I can say it is like, I wasn't on this journey and now I am, and I am on it. So it's not like I've arrived somewhere. I am now on a journey that I wasn't on. And I'm trying to invite people along on the journey, if that makes sense. So it's not like, hey, come to where I am. It's like, hey, come out of that thing and out into the open where there's more possibilities. Yeah.
I just think there's like a clear tone that, like, sometimes people speak because they think there might be fire, right? They see smoke and they're excited, like maybe there's some fire burning and it matters. And others go like, do you see the fire? Like, this is real. And that shift in tone in the songs, it, like, to me is exciting because the one of the signs you've internalized all or kind of like are bearing the fruits of a lot of the pain and struggle you've gone through is when you can speak from it like without having to posture or kind of like pick yourself up by like some weird confidence and like name it and some animosity, or like you feel like I don't really know if I can own my voice. One of the things of this song is like, yeah, you can get back to owning your voice. And so many of the criticisms people get that come from more conservative Christian contexts and then start asking questions or things are like, well, how do you even know? Right. Like, or like all these type of security or confidence questions. And I just think this album shows someone who has tried to rework all sorts of things and have wrestled with it. The confidence you get is a different one. It's not one that involves closure. It actually is one that trusts the possibility of openings. And this is what it sounds like to trust the potential of creativity, trusting that goodness and beauty are possibilities in any moment.
Yeah, that's great, Trev. I like that a lot because I think that's true, and I feel it internally as you say it. I'm like, yes, that is how I feel. And I'm glad it's coming through the music because I think coming through the music is going to be more impactful than me trying to ever explain it. You know, it's like getting.
Well, it definitely sounds cooler because I when I was thinking about even how to like say things, I was thinking in it. I was like, Jesus, Trip, you can't not sound like a minister. And then if you listen to the album, you're like, oh, this is just a badass rock album. And I'm like, you know, everyone has their growing edges, and some things are definitely best performed.
No, I mean, I liked what you said about the confidence is different.
Yeah.
A confidence feels very different from a confidence in a place of openness and uncertainty rather than a confidence that's from a place of certainty. Because I mean, I think we both know from experience that kind of confidence is a brittle thing. It's defensive and it's worried because it knows that it's not sufficient. It knows that it's not impregnable, but it wants to pretend that it is. And I think once you're in that open space, it doesn't feel the same way because you know, like, oh, I could walk a little bit to the left or I could walk a little bit to the right, and it's still okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So Buried in the Sun is what after we pull out of Afghanistan and you watch the mainstream media lose their biscuits. Like, obviously you didn't think this was going to be so well timed for something that is, you know, utterly problematic, like 20th anniversary of 9/11, that everything around ending a war and stuff. But Buried in the Sun really is a surprisingly direct burner. Like, if you were to think of the song where it doesn't take long to figure out what Dustin was going for, Buried in the Sun, like, I saw the fire on the television, the DOD or the CIA, if we're the cops and the world's our prison. Now, when you say all right in the song, I definitely the first time thought alt right and was if you haven't listened to the album, just go listen. It changes the whole song. But like when did you get to the point that you felt confident writing a song that was as explicit about in problematizing American imperialism?
Yeah, I mean, I've written a lot about that through the years, but this one is definitely really in your face, and I think it's again, like I didn't talk about in this interview, but I'm always trying to like let the song, like the song is already kind of trying to say something, in the way I look at it, and I'm trying to figure out what that is and pair it with like a more. Like the song doesn't have content yet, but it has feelings and it has emotions and it has dynamics and it has a flow. And so that this one was actually one of the ones that came out of the starting the nonsense lyrics. Like so many of the ones on this record, like have some kind of nugget starting there. But the very first little vocal demo I did, like I said something about the CIA in it, and it was like, that sounds good right there. All right, what's happening in the song? Actually, I think I said I think it start like in the fake lyrics was like, I saw the fire on the television, something CIA. And it just started, that picture started, building in my head, like, and I wanted to do something interesting where the verses are this very in your face explicit thing, and then the chorus is pretty shrouded, I think. I mean, I know like what I'm getting out of those images, but like it's a little more varied, and it's because the entire song is trying to get at the weird relationship of, it doesn't matter how explicitly you see, like right now we see things on TV about Afghanistan, whatever, or there's some black ops thing that you hear about 20 years later, maybe. And like, it doesn't matter which one, we still as Americans like can't get a grip on the fact that like we are an empire, that we have been undermining the sovereignty of other peoples forever, and we keep doing it. We do it in subtle ways, we do it in very overt ways, and so the Buried in the Sun is like kind of getting at this idea of like the sun, right, should expose things, but it also, like, if it's so bright in a certain context, like you don't see anything at all,
right?
So it's a weird like contrast there. And then the snarky like cheer thing, I realized, I don't know if it's unconsciously pulling from, but I was listening to the Ramones the other day, and Havana Affair came on, and he says the hooray for the USA part. It totally felt like the cheer in this, so I was kind of stoked on that.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that makes sense. The how would you describe the experiments that you're taking musically in the album compared to your previous work? Like, if you look at all of the Thrice albums, and having a 13-year-old that continuously gets more into what you're doing, I've heard songs I didn't know were you until he's like, I dig this song. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And he's like, it's Thrice, Dad. And I was like, oh, because I hadn't listened to music till we got to know each other and stuff. And so then I'm like listening to the This Is Thrice playlist on Spotify. So there's all these other songs. Those play, I didn't recognize it. Right. Like, and if you hadn't listened in a while, there's clearly new stages of Thrice, and then the kind of both melodies and imagery, but also like what kind of technology or things you're using in the production of the song. So musically, what were the kind of experiments going into this album?
Yes. I'm going to answer that. I realize I want to plug a book real quick though. Ties into the last song, and then I'm going to answer that. This book called The Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins, subtitled Washington's Anti-Communist Crusade and the Mass Murder Program That Shaped Our World. It's really good.
It makes you wonder what it's about with that subtitle.
I know.
You're like, are you sure you're talking about America?
Yeah. Anyway, I was worried it was going to be like way too, it focuses a lot on Indonesia during and during Cold War stuff, and so tons of that I had never heard about any of it, and the way it ties into the larger story of the Cold War, and it is fascinating and very, very, very good. And I thought it was gonna be overly academic. It's really, really well written and easy to read. So Jakarta Method. Anyway, so musical creativity on the new record. We're always trying to I don't know if you've listened to the Alchemy Index at all. That's like this big project we did was like fire, earth, air, water, like 4 different EPs. And it was so fun because it gave us these boundaries to push against and to pull from. And so you're like, okay, we're making the fire EP. And you're like, what am I going to write about? It's going to relate to fire. What things are, and so it's like, it gives you these little paths to go down and follow and pull things out that you never would have. And you're like, I want this guitar part to sound like fire. What does that look like? It's so fun to have those boundaries. So we're always searching for something that'll be as cool as that. And we still could never find anything, but we're still looking for little things to do. So this time we did these challenges. So we had like a big list of like just weird things like, hey, what if we did this? And what if this happened in the middle of a song? And so those were the pushbacks. And the easiest ones to point to that made like a really big difference would be like in Northern Lights, there's a guitar riff that comes in and it's based on the Fibonacci sequence. So that was like one of the challenges, like write a riff based on the Fibonacci sequence. Like, what's that going to sound like? So we did that and it sounds kind of crazy and cool. And then it's using chordal chords, which are these jazz chords, not specifically jazz chords. They're built on fourths instead of thirds. And so they kind of float over things in a different way and are less harmonically defined. And generally it's not something we would ever use. But we like jazz stuff that has it. So we're like, all right, let's use it and then see what happens. So the song gets built out of that stuff and then you kind of react to it because you're like, now what do we do with this? I've never done anything that sounds like this. How do I sing over this? Where does it go from here? And so that stuff was fun. And then in general, I think us working on our own, like always opens things up a bit in ways that are really hard to pin down. Sometimes you're like I can look back on certain songs in the last record and be like, that wouldn't have happened this time. And it's not because of like any one thing. It's just, I don't know. We move a little differently when no one's kind of in the conversation with us. So it feels pretty open. It's a really diverse record. Like there's a bunch on there that sounds different than anything we've done. I mean, similar elements are always going to be around when we're using, I don't know, guitars and drums and keyboards and whatnot. But I do think there's some totally unique vibes from anything we've done on a lot of the record.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is, why don't you give David Dark a shout out?
Yeah, so that song is based off a tweet thread from the good David Dark that he's been expanding for the past couple of years. But basically based on this idea of a metaphor he came up with of people being inside of these basically giant mechs, and those mechs representing systems that they're in, corporations, brands, powers and principalities that be, and that they are flesh and blood, though, and we don't wrestle against that. And so you invite them out. That's the soft exorcism, inviting them out. You don't have to stay up in that thing. Like, you can look and see the damage that's being done. And even though it's scary to come out, your paycheck, your community, whatever, might depend on you staying in. But you can always come out. You can change. And I think it's super important to remember that, because especially with how incredibly divided we all are right now and how our brains naturally function to hold up with our group and everybody else, it's a very easy time to feel like people can't change and people can't come out of those systems and whatever. And it's a long shot sometimes, but like, I mean, I look back at myself and I could not have foreseen the path that I'm on now. Right. Like, and yeah, I was thinking, I was trying to think like, who are the people who were, inviting me out, right? Like that were kind and engaging with me, but also we're saying, hey, there's a better way. There's something else out here. So yeah, if Alex Blondeau was one of those people, if you're listening, buddy. Yeah, we used to have these convos back in the day, and I just he has like emails of me being just like livid, just so frustrated talking to him about stuff. And it's funny to look at and just be like, oh yeah, I'm such an asshole. But you would not expect that guy to have changed. Like you wouldn't reading that stuff. So,
well, so where did y'all become friends? Like, what was the context for that set up, trusting him enough to put in an email?
I don't know. Him and another fan, we were in this email thing, the three of us sharing books. I think they brought me a book at a show before. And yeah, we're just trying to talk about stuff, but I just didn't, the stuff that he was trying to say to me, it just seemed like nonsense at the time, like because of my presuppositions about certain things. It was just like, but what? No, you can't even none of it was connecting. And I try to remember that too, because I think back on like, I think so often when we're trying to talk to people, we forget to imagine what they're actually hearing. Imagine like, what is the thing stopping them from even beginning to process what I'm saying to them? That's hard.
Oh, it definitely is. And something that doesn't help you remember that most people aren't having the conversation from your own context and situation is when you're like, there are things that modify whatever your normal is. Like, one, if you're in the academy, right, then you hang out with other people with graduate degrees or want to get one. Or if you are in a religious tradition, then you spend time with people that all have some set of assumptions that make them think this space is worth the allegiance that shows up in time, financial commitment, volunteering, all that kind of stuff. And then there are those things about like where you live and are born. Like, there are a lot of ways in which we, because we succeed by imagining how people like us are thinking in a moment and then acting, we don't know what it would be like not to have those experiences.
Yes.
And when you go through changes, it is quite shocking to like think of that previous version of you.
Yeah.
And then go, if I only told you. And like sometimes when you see those memes, it was like, what would you tell 17-year-old you? And
I just did one on Twitter the other day.
Oh,
it was a 3-word one. What would you say if you could say 3 words to your 18-year-old self? And I said, process relational thinking, or process relational philosophy is what I said. Because, and that sounds like super pedantic and dumb if you don't understand the reason. The reason is,
Dustin, are you worried that you're going to have to convince me that you could tell a younger self process relational thinking, and I'm going to be like, bad answer? Because
no. I'm just saying, like, it's not a bad answer, but I think it can seem like overly, like, it's like, is that really going to be the thing that helps you? And it would have, in my opinion, because in my like crisis of faith in like late teens, early 20s, what I lacked was a third way. Like I thought I could stay in the thing that I knew, which was like an evangelical inerrantist kind of situation, or I could go full materialist, atheist, and I thought I would lose goodness, truth, and beauty. And I couldn't let those go. They were too deeply like integrated in the way I function in the world. So I was like, I guess I'm going to stay, because I guess the only way to support these things is the view I already had, which was totally wrong. And had I had that third way, then my life would have looked drastically different, I think.
Well, if you had joined the process party earlier, we could have been friends earlier, and you could have been on the podcast more. I really feel like that would have helped. I mean, your friendship's more valuable than coming on the podcast. But I'm just saying that as an evangelist for the process party, I mean, I'm glad you're here, but you could have come earlier. But you know, when you when you look back at this point, with the kind of, from a place where you're able to write with a different kind of confidence, like, I mean, yes, if you had the meme, the 3 words, but what does the invitation sound like to those who are just now beginning to ask questions, challenges, criticisms, and such, to robustly Christian yet significantly more closed visions of the world? Like, a lot of us that haven't been there in a long time are not ones to be asking what that first invitation or question or even affirmation of someone starting sounds like. So, like, what kind of advice do you have for meeting people there?
I don't know. I mean, I think music has a way of...
Look, I really think the fact that you write music that lots of people like is really helping you dodge questions effectively.
Because I said music right away.
Yeah, but you're like, you would know. You say like, I don't know, and then
Sorry,
I'm like,
okay.
And then I go, okay, you don't know, but also I'm a rock star, so I have a magical ability to write songs people choose to listen to, learn, and come sing with me while spending their money.
No, I'll answer without the music. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's a power in tying back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, even I think the confidence that ends up being available once you've kind of are out on that journey or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not in the moment of reacting. I'm not in the moment of like struggling with all this stuff. Like, there's some sort of settledness, which sounds weird because you're talking about moving at the same time, but that confidence that is basically, I think, as you patiently and hopefully winsomely speak from that place, like, it engenders a possibility that someone else could come there too, right? Like, so I think a lot of it is about opening up possibilities. And because I honestly think the number one pushback that I get, especially talking about like inerrancy or something, because that was like very cornerstone issue for me once I had realized, I don't think there's a good reason to hold on to this. Now, whoa, there's like all these options open. What do I do?
Yeah.
Which is a little bit overwhelming for sure, but people anticipate that. And so when you talk about inerrancy, the pushback is always, but if I let it go, how do I know what's right? How do I know which part of this I take this way? Like, it's not an actual argument. It's just a fear that's being articulated. Like, I am scared that if I let this go, I don't know what happens. And that's super understandable. And I definitely felt that way too. But people generally don't realize it's not actually an argument against this. It's just scary. And that's okay. Right. And you can confront the fear. And especially if you talk to someone on the other side of it, I think it can start to be like, oh, maybe there is somewhere to actually go. Because I mean, I grew up like listening to your podcast and listening to mostly, like, when I first started listening to your podcast, it was blowing my mind that I think I told you this. Like, I had grown up thinking that like any sort of like at all liberally like lefty Christianity, whatever, like was like it almost was like worse than the unbeliever. Like, it was just like these people are.
You have no idea how much worse it is.
Yeah. So, but like, I didn't like just hearing people from a totally different world that still shared like all of the foundational language and stuff, but like
Mhm.
talking about things in a totally different way was mind blowing and super helpful to be like, oh man, there's a whole world over here. And so I think that was helpful in the journey too, was being like, oh, there's already a whole thing. There's people over here. There's like paths laid down. There's, and like I don't have to follow all of them, but like there's a world here over this mountain. And someone had told me like, no, that's a cliff, man. There's nothing over there. You get to the top, you're like, there's a bunch of stuff over here.
If you go past this line, you get a millstone around your neck and off the cliff, son. Okay, do you want to guess what my current favorite song on the album is? We haven't talked about it yet.
I'm gonna guess. Let's see, process of elimination. There's only like 5 left. I know. I'm gonna say The Dreamer.
Yes. Yes. Now, why do you think so?
I don't know.
Oh,
I really don't know. A lot of people have been liking that. I like all the songs, but it's one that I don't know. For some reason, I felt like it wouldn't resonate with people as much, but it is. So why is it your favorite song?
Okay. Initially it was the way you played with like John Lennon's Imagine lyrics. Like, you may say I'm a dreamer, and then that goes into somebody said I'm a dreamer. I never knew why, but because before it was I'm not the only one, right? Like the statement was there is some shared dream and I'm not the only one that has it, kind of thing. And then this one is some say you're a dreamer. What does it sound like in our context to be called a dreamer is different than it was in that context. That was my initial fascination with the way you played with that. And then the third time I listened to the album earlier today, I now think the song's extremely catchy. So there's like that when I wasn't listening, I was doing the like, oh, that's what I'm humming right now.
Oh yeah.
But
the chorus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now the whole end where you do like, who is a dreamer and what is a dream and what's hidden in between. Now like the promissory note, which used to be either in some fictitious dream, like the kind of John Lennon naive promissory note, or the escapist promissory note. Instead, who is a dreamer and what is a dream? What's hidden in between? What's hidden in between is the very place of imminent potentiality. And so the dream is no longer it moves from something that's no longer escapist, but projectile. Like it's throwing us back into the world in a different way.
I like that. Yeah, this song is one for me that's it's like the most living at the moment, and probably will be, like, because it's the one that I pushed furthest into like not absolutely like nailing down my ideas of it as I wrote it, like following the images and feeling like where they were taking me, but trying not to capture them fully in the sense of like stripping away some of their mystery and efficacy to pull things out of me. So it's like I have things that I, when I wrote it, I was thinking about, but it's also a lot more open than some of them, I think. So yeah, it's just the idea that I think there's something to that, like a continually open question that's still engaging you like towards a trajectory.
Okay, so I had a number of messages in the ask about thing related to that podcast, which I haven't listened to, about Mars Hill, but I've only listened to Dan Koch and Tony Jones talking about it for the You Have Permission members podcast because, well, I mean, I love Dan, but Tony Jones and I have been friends a long time. And so I've only heard the commentary about it, but I had 3 tweets and 2 DMs.
It's been weird. I haven't listened to all of it yet. And I've been seeing, you know, some of the stuff online, some of the pushback. I decided not to go on record with it, at least at this point, just because the whole thing was very traumatic for my family. And trying not to like drag us through that again. So we had that, and then we had another unfortunate church event happen once we're back in California. So there's a lot of stuff with that, and so we'll see. I doubt that will change, but I don't know. I'm also curious if there's a point where I feel like I'll have to be like, hey, wait. But I have talked to Mike, who's doing it off record, about some stuff. So my hope is that, you know, there's no way to get it right, because you're one person making this thing, and you're going to have a perspective, and you're going to miss a lot of people's perspectives. But I'm hopeful that it can do some of what it seems like Mike's trying to do, which is explore why did this thing happen, and can awareness help us to not let this kind of thing happen again. So
what did you
that's helpful that way.
What it like, if you look back, not about what happened, but what you learned, like what are your takeaways, like personally, when that you gained, like going from there to where you are now? Like what are the lessons you learned that you hope your kids don't have to learn on their own?
Whenever I talk about it or think about it, I think the largest thing that was corrupted for me that made it possible to go down that road was an idea of calling within the Christian community. Like I kind of was raised, and I don't know how much of this is like explicit or it's just like in the water, but like calling is like the ultimate, like it's going to trump everything. And also you kind of assume that the hardest thing you're asked to do is the thing you're called to. And so that kind of idea, I think, was weaponized in how Mars Hill brought people in, and especially recruited people, playing to like, oh yeah, this is like where you're called to, is like, it's where your gifts are going to be used the best. And you know, like, and it's not like, I'm not saying you can't think that way. I'm just saying when you're taught that, like, there's so much pressure to be like, oh, I don't ignore God's calling. Right. Then you end up doing things that, even though you have all of these warning lights going off, you rationalize those because you're like, oh, it's just hard. It's just, these are things that are like hard about, but I'm being called to it. So I got to go, you know, and had I had a different understanding of that, I would not have ended up there. So
have you seen that Netflix documentary Turning Point? It's the 9/11 documentary.
Is it new?
Yeah, it's really new, I think. I turned it on the high speed version of Netflix and watched it yesterday.
Oh, you can do high speed Netflix?
Yeah, you can do like 1.5x. And I basically mostly just listened to it. But well, I was doing the yard work, but the you know, it picks up these people who, like, some of them are going like, I can't believe I went along with this or thought this or believed this about weapons of mass destruction, and or blinding to signals from Muslim extremist terrorists that are like perverting the religion and wanting to attack. Like there are all these things. Like some of them are like now going like, what happened? And others are just being like, well, this wasn't completely unreasonable, right? And they still haven't left. Like Alberto Gonzalez is like, I mean, they wanted to call it torture, but what we did was we had a fall away wall, so they weren't really going to get choked out. Once the pressure got enough that it would actually kill them, the wall would break away. And they didn't know the wall, the terrorists didn't know wall would break away. And by terrorist, I mean the person we paid, we had a bounty, and they sent random farmers from Afghanistan. You're watching it, and there's like these two responses where with this distance, you have people that are like, I'm sorry I messed up, and I can't believe how I was in the situation and bought it. And there are all these other things other than seeking the truth that's happening in it. And I failed. And there's others that are like, well, if you just do the details correctly, it doesn't look that bad. But yes, we did.
Yeah, I mean, people don't. You don't want a reckoning, right? Like, you don't want to see, because that involves like owning your part in hurting people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that there's a sense that we don't. When we look back, if you've come to evaluate what you've done differently, where it's something you're wanting to leave behind, or there's something that you're still claiming, that means you have to narrate that distance in a different way. And I think one of the things that the whole tonality of the new album does is the past can be what it is precisely because it gets rewritten in how you show up in the next moment. And so some of the same themes and struggles get seen from a very different perspective, which is why the last song to me is so beautiful when it's put at the end of an album that explores both our very individual struggle of becoming and how we deal with our past and possibilities that come, all the way to our collective, like thinking about the economy or nationalism, militarism. Like you go from like macro to micro, and then end with I don't know, you and Whitehead did a collab for a hymn, and to the many becoming one and increased by one kind of image. And that to me is, I mean, I guess I'm probably in the complete target audience for that song, but that to me is a different way of describing grace, right? Like there's a way of describing grace where it's imputed. You contribute nothing because you're worth nothing that's not given to you, right? And then it involves an intervention, and you're the object of its action. And then there's a kind of grace that says there is what's received, there is you, there is what's happened, there is the past, there is the one, and I'm not erasing any of it, but I'm saying here's the many. And it's not many with chaos, it's not many with dismissal, it's not many where the particularities evaporate, it's a many with an invitation to become one. And in that becoming, you meet the gift of the many again, right? And so the whole movement of the album gets to this unitive moment, but it's a unitive moment that in its collapsing and in its unity is an invitation. And every invitation is an invitation to increased valuation, increased beauty, truth, goodness, that kind of thing. And the line, the me with star-swept eyes, alive with fresh beginnings, new grass beneath black skies, like the what is the case that the contrast comes into black skies, something like that. It's not a threat to what's happening. It's the place in which the invitation of newness comes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't even know. That's not great. A question. That's just about me really, really liking that song and how like thinking about you, your person, the album, how stuff shifts, like why I liked it so much. And honestly, I never asked that shitty questions about a book. I guess I'm just not good at asking questions about music, I think.
You're doing great. No, I like what you said about the black sky there. I think because to me it's like a pre-dawn black sky.
Yeah.
Like the possibility of the day is within it. But that's, I don't think I thought about it in that sense of the possibility rests in that moment when where there is no illumination. And if you sit and are patient in it, like those things reveal themselves to you.
Mm-hmm. You know, the other image that came to me in relation to that song is Gandalf's promise to Aragorn as he's, they're separating and he ends up in Helm's Deep, but he's like on the morning of the third day. Like, and the whole statement and doesn't tell him what happens up to that moment. And all the way up to that moment, it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
But it's the precise context where he can look at the king that's feeling like he's failed his people and now Helm's Deep's going to get sacked, blah, 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 blah. And then like go out with me to meet the morning. But like his confidence in making that is because he trusted a promise before he realized how shitty things would get before it. And I think a lot of people, we're so tempted to give in once we get uncomfortable if things get difficult, because we don't really know that in the midst of all that, the grace of possibility comes no matter where you are. Paul put it in the love of God in Christ Jesus can go all the way to Sheol up to heaven. So there's no way you can escape it. And the song itself is an invitation to go like where all of our dead ends, fizzle out, like take the exhale, because that's like when Argon's like, let us go out to meet the more, they will know a day, like he gives that speech. And it is in some sense, it's an invitation to go like, we're going to freaking die.
Yeah.
Right. So we may as well make it memorable. Like the nevertheless
there's a large unknown quality.
Yeah. But there's a difference when the unknown is the very place possibility comes and not where closure, finally proves itself. It's just like the shift of what the unknown represents as the very place, the chaosmos of the divine humming over the deeps, or is it the threat to the one true patriarchal hierarchical power? Shout out Catherine Keller. This is an Elgin question. It's an Elgin question. He wants to know, is it louder in the audience at your show or is it louder on stage? And this is because recently when he was talking with his drum teacher, who Mike McKee is a drummer of Delta Ray, and then Zach Lynn posted this video of the Jimmy Eat World about how quiet it is on their stage because they all use headphones and stuff. It was like both really soft, and he's heard my family complain that I was not that good at music, but I was really loud, and that's why I can't hear. And so I think he has a prejudice to band practices being loud at this point, because he's like, your friends that are professionals, their band practices aren't loud. People think you're deaf because your mediocre band practice was loud. So
we use in-ears, so it's, I mean, there's still volume on stage, but we've never been the band that's like trying to be the loudest. Like when we play out of like combo amps, like it's like early on we're like, yeah, these things are plenty loud enough and they're smaller to take around, so we're gonna do that.
Well, when I was in college and we switched to smaller amps, I brought 4 12-inch stacks I didn't plug in to carry around just for looks. And they were 2 cabinets that were single stacked. So they just look like 4 12-inch speakers just stacked up, in stacks. And I would climb up on it occasionally. And one time at the end of the show, I jumped off of it and I had a wedgie of sorts. It ripped the crotch of my jeans open
mid jump.
And it was embarrassing.
Was it a Lenny Kravitz moment? Not quite that bad.
No, I don't want to associate any part of my inadvertent revealing of personhood to what would be like to be with Lenny Kravitz when it happens, because Lenny Kravitz is attractive, handsome, rock god. No one was interested in in flying away when my crotch ripped open. It was at a Christian coffee house as well. But hey, Dustin, great decision on the last question. Nostalgia, you're not that into it. What's up with that? I mean, because honestly, I've listened to a lot of 90s rock music in the last 2 years in lockdown, and I like it a lot. Don't you want to go to a Spin Doctor show?
Yeah. I want to go to Gin Blossom show if we're gonna go.
Oh yeah.
Go there. Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like the last year has made everyone very nostalgic for a lot of music of their formation. But yeah, in the penultimate song on the record, I talk about a toxic nostalgia, which I think we see a lot of right now. And so using the image of dandelion wine from the book of the same name from Ray Bradbury, where in the book, they make the dandelion wine in the summer, they put it down the cellar, and then in the winter they bring it out and they drink a little bit, and it reminds them of the summer. And there's this, so there's like a good nostalgia in there, like, oh yeah, what is it like when it's not all freezing like this? And it brings it back viscerally, right? Because you taste and you smell. And so that's kind of cool. But I thought about what would it look like to use that and push it further and go into like a Edgar Allan Poe kind of morality tale and talk about what does it look like when that nostalgia is toxic and is dangerous. And essentially I think so much of what we've seen in the past couple of years is this, trying to make something great again, right? Yeah, without looking at so first of all, as we remember things anyway, we always remember them wrong, right? So remembering something a lot of us didn't even live through, first of all, and then we're also remembering it better than it was. We're choosing not to remember the problematic things that even made whatever good that was there possible, right?
Yeah.
And even in that story, there's a beauty in this little it's like the 20s. It's a little Midwestern town. And as you read it, you're tempted to be like, oh yeah, this is it. But even Bradbury is kind of problematizing that idea as he settles into it as well. But you think about what terrible things are actually happening around this to even make this kind of idyllic thing possible at that time. So yeah, the song is this little thing talking about this person not wanting to address it's winter out, it's snowing, it's and they want to basically ignore so much that's happening that they shut it out and shut out the world around them, and it ends up becoming their tomb, as it should in any good Poe-esque story.
Well, that's not the only kind of spaces that nostalgia for the past leads to a kind of cultivated ignorance about the problematic nature of the history. I mean, yeah, the whole "Make America Great Again" kind of thing, but I mean, even the way a lot of Christians think of the church where they're like, oh, well, let's get back to the biblical church or the early church or whatever. Or, I don't know, our church playing network should be Acts 29 because there were 28 chapters in the New Testament. Or like in some ways, right, the desire to be faithful to the origin points, good. But also the idea that the distance between here and there has nothing to contribute to what faithfulness looks like now is like that nostalgia can lead to a kind of naivete around faithfulness where all sorts of problems that we should have learned and grown through are internalized anew.
Yeah. And then, I mean, yeah, you'll see again, yeah, so much of that stuff, like you look back and you just kind of pick up the things that you like about it and you're like, oh yeah, but it was all like this. And you're like, you try to talk to someone about like, oh, yeah, you're talking about like the church fathers and like, what about this thing? This is super problematic. Or how about this? This guy doesn't read the Bible at all like you do, but you're convinced that like everyone's always read it like you do. Like, so what do you do with that? Yeah, the past is a complex place to wade into, but we generally want to simplify it and just use it for our purposes.
Where should people that want to hang out with you live while you play loud music go? And obviously the album's going to show up on all the streaming sites and things like, but if you're wanting to support a band, what are the best ways to demonstrate said support?
Yeah, you can pick up the record. Well, it'll be digitally available. If you buy the physical copy, it comes with these cool chroma depth glasses, which is fun, and it makes the artwork 3-dimensional, even though it doesn't normally look 3-dimensional. Yeah, it uses color. It's really cool. Yeah, so check that out. That'll be fun. And then, yeah, come see us on the road. We're playing all over the States, just following this. Almost all the shows requiring vaccinations or negative tests in the past 2 days. Encourage you to wear a mask. And I'm really excited for the shows to happen. So I'd love to have people come join us. But
who's touring with you?
Touche Amore, or do you say it Amore? I think it's Touche Amore, yeah. And Self Defense Family. It's a good bill. It's a very good bill.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for hanging out.
Thanks for having me on, bud.
I like being your friend.
Likewise.